Have you ever wondered how leveraging diversity and inclusion within your own business can help create a collaborative culture and solve problems faster? Some companies and executives struggle with diversity and inclusion not because they're not committed to the values, but they don't know where to start. Today, on episode 5 of BBB Business Leaders Unplugged, we sit down with Dr. Tony Byers, a global diversity and inclusion expert. He has an impressive track record of leading highly respected D&I programs in large multinational organizations, including Starbucks, Heinz Company, and Cargill Inc. Dr. Tony Byers on the show, Business Leaders Unplugged. Dr. Byers, this is a treat to have you. Our paths crossed several years ago. It was a diversity and inclusion summit with Starbucks. And I'm so glad and thankful and grateful that we've been able to stay in touch and today have this conversation about diversity and inclusion.
David, I thank you for inviting me, and I appreciate the opportunity. And I do remember that summit at Starbucks. That it seems like long ago, but also very, very recent at the same time, if that's possible. So, yeah.
It was very memorable. Great breakout discussions. We had a good time. I love today's topic. It's a sticking point to me, and it's I'd say especially over the last several years being in the business sector. I think when we think of diversity and inclusion, it goes way beyond just gender and race, and especially when it reflects businesses. And I would love for you to break down, if you don't mind, because I've heard different definitions. What is diversity? What is inclusion? And how does it relate to business?
Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of definitions, and people talk about it from varying perspectives. And I try to make it simple. So let me talk about it from the broader perspective in terms of what the definition, what it means, and then let's go down to look at it from a micro perspective in terms of what it could mean for business. So if you think about it from a broader perspective, diversity is essentially just, it refers to the presence of people who are part of a group or who are on your team. And that includes a wide range of characteristics, some that are seen, like you can visibly see the characteristics, and you think about that in terms of perhaps maybe race or maybe gender or maybe even abilities in some cases, and then some things that are unseen, which also could include include different patterns of thinking, styles or behaviors. Is what we try to tell people. There's certain things that you are born with, like who you are, and then there are certain things that you acquire through your interaction society. And that is this broader definition of what diversity means. But when you think about inclusion refers to the practice of making all team members feel connected to an environment and ensuring that everyone has an equal opportunity to either grow and or contribute to the organization business set or skill set. So diversity is the mix of all the unique things that go into it. And inclusion is making the mix work. That is your actions to ensure that the mix actually come out to create what you want it to create at the end of the day. But as you think about it for businesses, though, there are two, I always like to tell business leaders two things. Think about it in terms of people, and then think about it in terms of perspectives. Diversity is from people. Do I have diversity in terms of my people? And then inclusion, how am I gaining those perspectives in order to help our business be successful? So there's, two different ways of thinking about it. There's the mix and making the mix work, but just want to be real simple. It's about people and then those perspectives and how I gain, leverage, utilize them.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I know in your book, the multiplier effect of inclusion, which we have I'll try to get the light in there so people can see it. We'll have a link in the description box below. And I know you talk a lot about this in your book, and you have some good case studies there at the end. I'm curious if there's some specific examples of organizations, and maybe it's Heinz, maybe it's Starbucks, or maybe it's organizations that you've worked with, but can you talk and describe some good examples where you've had an organization embrace D&I and they become profitable and better for it?
Yeah, there are a lot. And in many cases, we don't pay attention to all of the aspects of diversity and inclusion that actually make an organization better. So inside of the book, in which you just showed, and very kind for doing that, thank you, I tell the story of Frito-Lay Company. And that is a story basically of Cheetos. And if you're not familiar with the story of Cheetos, from my understanding, they're making a movie of this, but this was some time ago that Cheetos actually had an employee who was a part of the janitorial staff, and he had an opportunity to actually create what we call flavored chips or flavored Cheetos, the hot flavored Cheetos that you see today, that ended up being or becoming a $1 billion market category in terms of sales for Frito-Lay Company. And this is the story exactly how it happens. This individual was working for the company, and then the company online, they were making some Cheetos. What occurred is that the machine that actually put the dust on the Cheetos, if you eat those things, it was not working. And so it created a number of bags that had no flavor on it. So they gave the Cheetos away to an employee. This employee who was who received some of these Cheetos, what he did is he took some Cheetos and he would put different flavor like hot sauce on it or different hot spices on his Cheetos and then shake it up. He took some home, he tried it, his family members tried it, he had friends tried it, and finally somebody convinced him to share it with the CEO because they said, this is really, really good. So he had a chance to just, hey, I had an idea, shared it with the CEO. The CEO loved the idea. They created this flavored then snack chip or flavored Cheeto that again led to a $100 billion category in the marketplace and changed the way that you start to see flavored snacks enter the market right now. And so you can see flavors from potato chips to peanuts to almonds to all kinds of flavored snacks as a result of somebody bringing kind of their authentic self or background to this experience.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's a great example of a company that took it 10x and became extremely profitable. You'd think, gosh, why hasn't this picked up? Why hasn't this been more rapid and more frequent? Do you think D&I can be almost intimidating for an organization to tackle, especially if they don't know too much about it?
I think so. I think what occurs is that people, for one reason or another, have learned to try to be afraid of this subject. Now, if you've been in business for a while, if you're a part of a generation where the concept of having conversations at work, there was always a thing that there's three things you don't talk about at work. You don't talk politics, you don't talk race, you don't talk gender. So people grew up with, nope, I don't talk about it. And then there's this notion or this belief that has become like ignoring who people are makes for a better team environment. So here's an example of that, David. You might not have known when I logged on to this session today that I am a Black or African-American male. Why? Because I left that outside the door, right? And so people say, leave your is outside the door and then just come in and contribute to the team. That cannot happen. I mean, we understand why people wanted to leave differences because they were either create challenges, but it is that difference in perspective and thinking and style and all these other things that actually contribute to the success of a product, service, or solution that I'm trying to provide. So if I'm asking people to leave that, or if I'm creating an environment where me, who I am, is not welcome, then what you end up doing is you affect the ability for me to be able to bring that into the environment, and then consequently for us to be able to gain success because of it. So again, me walking into a room saying, you might not know that I'm an African-American male, and everybody's looking at me is like, oh, really? Because I can see that you are an African-American male, but you're still telling me to leave part of my humanity, or in many cases, leave all of my humanity outside the door. Just doesn't work.
2020, obviously, crazy year, impacted so many different people in different ways. Are there opportunities? I mean, a lot of the folks that are listening to this interview and this conversation are small business owners, obviously heavily impacted by the pandemic, and they're looking for new ways to reinvent themselves this year and moving forward.
Mm.
Are there opportunities you think, and starting today, for small businesses to really rethink about, their core customer or the people they hire, or maybe embracing the values and the behaviors of D&I into their business?
Mm.
Do you see that as a giant opportunity for businesses moving forward?
I do. I mean, you can point to it in a couple of different ways. And so what we see is that those businesses, small businesses in particular, have a chance to leverage an opportunity in terms of diversity and inclusion by thinking about it from 2 points. Brand, who they are. That brand then either helps them attract customers or attract clients or increase sales. And then there's products or services, whatever it is that they provide to people. So let's look at those two tracks quickly. If you think about brand, if I can tell you the number of large companies that I interact with right now who are saying that we are a company, as a large company, that values diversity and inclusion. And so as we start to look at smaller companies that we're going to partner with, or they're going to become a vendor of ours, or they're going to provide some type of service for us, one of the things that we're asking all companies who partner with us is to demonstrate how you value that particular perspective of diversity and inclusion. I can't tell you the number of smaller financial services firms who say, well, Tony, we haven't really thought about it, but now we're trying to work with large bank X, and they're asking us, what should we do? What is our mission? What is our perspective? How do we do this? Well, I mean, if you're just now getting to the point that you're thinking about it, you are slightly behind. So you really should have an answer for what's your perspective? What are you doing? Why is it important to you? How does it work inside of your organization, so that you can share that as you try to gather or gain a larger contract with an individual. And the same things go with products and sales. And so if you're thinking about products or sales or services, then you're not asking yourself, what does this large consumer mix want? Or how would they like to receive the products or services that I provide? Then you're not at a place where you're thinking about innovation and growth. And how do you take a very successful product? You're a business owner, a business leader, you have something that people want. But when you start to look at your sales, you start to ask yourself, what's going to be required to increase sales? And that part is where innovation comes in. And innovation typically happens when you have a different perspective and more voices around the table. Many people think of innovation if somebody creates something and it skyrockets to the moon immediately tomorrow. And that's not how it works. It is a small tweak on an already existing product or service that you provide that makes consumers want or desire your product more. And you can do that by having different voices involved in the table that help you think about how to adjust or tweak to make your product or service more palatable to your end user.
Awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say, we had a conversation with Dr. Evans Baya a couple weeks ago on innovation and growth strategies, and he described innovation as, how are you creating value? And
yeah, interesting.
Anyway, good transition there. Looking back on 2020, from your perspective, both personally and professionally, and from the folks that you work with and continue to work with, what were some of the big aha moments?
2020 personally was challenging, because you look at the event, I should say, that really asked people to take a stronger look at what's happening in society was just unfortunate. And to capture and to see it live and to see it displayed every hour or every 20 minutes was just emotionally taxing for me. And then there was a level of optimism that came on the backside of this. And so someone asked me about this before, and I said, I'm optimistically frustrated. And one of the things that I see is that the optimism is the response to what we saw by the larger community, very diverse, in terms of age and background and perspective, and just every aspect of diversity you can think about that touch the U.S., that touch North America, that touch the entire world, where you're starting to see people stand up and say, all right, we have to really do something different. And that's the part that creates optimism, is that now we see this effort of trying to find ways to get better in the space of looking at inequalities and how we treat people, what's the differences, and then valuing people, valuing human beings, valuing lives becomes an important conversation. So what we learn is that there is an increased importance for this. Like people are really now saying as a consumer that this is important to us. And my expectation of you, company X, is that you value people, value life, value human beings, and that you demonstrate it. Before, David, all we had to do is say that we did. We used to have it on the wall. I got values that say, everybody is welcome. Well, it's no longer important for you to say it. Now the expectation is how do you demonstrate that? And you demonstrate that by your actions or by what your organization looks like or by what you support or how you engage the community. And if you're not doing those things, then I think what you will find is that your consumer base will choose other options. And so that has put a level of expectations on businesses, whether you're large or small, to ensure that they are becoming that type of business. So it is now moving from this pendulum of moving from, will you just verbally support us, to will you show us actual progress that you're making towards support larger communities, has been very important for every business leader to think about.
Yeah, I always say talk is cheap. And,
totally, right?
Yeah, it's time to walk the walk and put action to those words.
But here's what's unique about that, David, is that phrase, talk is cheap, has been around a long time, right? This is not a new thing for us where we've just heard it like 12 months ago. This is a thing that we've always said talk is cheap. But somehow around the conversation around diversity and inclusion, talk was enough. And now we are really being called to the carpet about what are you going to do? You can't just say we support all people and have a great commercial with two people hugging. You have to really get to a point where you're demonstrating the value of what this means and how this shows up and where you spend resources and how you're engaging other voices. And that is now the part where we get to understand that talk is not cheap. It is going to be what the activity, what the resource, it costs something for you. And the cost doesn't always mean money. It may mean time, it may mean commitment, it may mean, engagement. And so people now will say, well, it costs too much to do this thing. And just think about what you're saying. You're saying that it costs too much for you to value human beings. When you frame it like that, I just don't understand how we could come to that point. But it's not always a money thing. So I'll get off my soapbox, but you just got to really disarm people who want to hide behind that it costs too much, because it really doesn't.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that answer. And it's, again, a good segue into our next question. At Better Business Bureau, our organization's been around for more than 100 years, and it's really focused on our standards for trust. That's our true differentiator. Trust, integrity, ethics, and our values. I'm curious, can trust and integrity, does that fit into this formula when we talk about diversity and inclusion? And is that part of, can you connect the dots between those?
I really believe you can. And here's why. Because I used to have a mentor, and this goes back. He used to have a little saying that I used to think did not make sense. All right, I don't understand that this guy, he was a big brass guy, and he would always make these statements, and you would look at him with the head turn like, what are you saying? But one of the things that he said is that trust can only be lost. It can never be earned. And I used to think, man, that is the craziest comment that I've ever had before in my life, or heard, excuse me. But as I kind of move through life, I start saying, like inherently we want to trust people and we see ourselves trusting people. But when the trust is broken and you start to spend a great deal of time and effort trying to repair it, you end up losing customers, and you end up losing, employees, or you end up losing that leverage that you have. So what you want to do is, we don't want to lose trust, but we want to leverage trust to help us help our community, or help our customers, or help our clients see us as the type of organization in which we say we are. All of us have a mission statement. We all talk about our values, and we got perspectives on growth, but we have to actually enter relationships of trust in order to kind of make those things come to life. Diversity, equity, inclusion is all about trust. It is our ability to be able to sit down with our larger community and have them trust us or see us as someone who cares about them. And if so, that is evident by you come into my small shop and you sit here and you feel comfortable, you feel like you belong. You need to trust that that's happening. That is evident by, me as a smaller business trying to get a larger contract. Because I have appropriate relationships, that large company sees me as a trusted member of the community. And that is evident by the people who work here, by the way they interact, the things that I support. So all of these behavioral things that you do are all designed to fill the trust bucket, if you will. And then you're able to let the community or your customers know and let potential clients know that you are the type of organization that actually can be trusted in terms of building stronger relationships across difference and creating a community of people who value and respect you. And then that trust grows. And then that's what you want to do. You want to multiply trust versus losing trust.
There were some incredible stories last year, even though 2020 was a very challenging year, but there were incredible stories of people going above and beyond, and organizations going above and beyond to help out communities, to help out people, to help out their employees.
Yeah.
Are you optimistic that we can become better based off of the experiences that we've had last year? Are we starting to at least have the conversation, it sounds like? But are you optimistic that we can get past this hurdle?
I am. I think there's stages of growth on this thing. And I think in terms of stage one, which is like reflection, we're starting to get to the point where we're acknowledging it, talking about it. And then from the reflection piece, we move towards the affirmation, where we're starting to affirm people and their experience. And you can see that daily. And you can also see that by where organizations are now starting to direct resources and all those other things. And then the last piece is action. And so as we go through reflection and affirmation, or reflection and commitment to action, I think what you see right now is a great deal of energy in stages 1 and 2, and you're starting to see a lot of energy in stages 3, which is the action. There are some organizations that are lagging because they're sitting to say, what if I don't do it right? And then what I got to tell those organizations, doing nothing is actually far worse. And so how is it that you can, from your sphere of influence, start to think about how you can engage, understand, and learn? This is the reflection piece, doing a real assessment, like what are we really doing to create, environments of community? Don't just assume, hey, because I got the doors open, I am actually doing that. You're not, right? So you really sit back and ask yourself, what is it that we're really doing to create this larger community, this more engaged community? Because when the consumers all are profitable and they all trust us and they're all engaged and they see us, what we see from every aspect is market growth from large to small. When consumers feeling good, they're actually going out and they're spending in the marketplace. That affects us. And so we have to do our part in terms of making sure that we create those levels of environment. And it's going to start with the reflection of ourselves and what are we actually doing? And are we really open? Are we really committed to this whole thing? And then that will lead towards demonstrating or redefining the commitment, and that will lead towards action. And that's what we want, a lot more action from people. So that was a long answer to your question, but yes, I am optimistic, but I'm also cautious because, we've seen waves where people get engaged and then out, then in and out, kind of blips on the scale. But this one is much larger. So, we're seeing it from small to extremely large, from local to across the globe. So even if we do see a slowdown, the scale of it is so large that we should expect to see great impact at the end of the day.
I know that reflection, that self-reflection can be difficult. And I've seen leaders and I've seen organizations, when you talk about authentic leadership, struggle. And are you able to reflect without bias?
Yeah.
And that, that unconscious bias. So it's much more difficult than to actually put in action. But I think by starting, if I'm not, mistaken, Dr. Byers, but just having those conversations and starting to reflect and be more self-aware, and try to block out those biases, then that's certainly a giant first step.
Totally. And we see a lot of organizations doing that where they reached out to us and said, we don't know where to start. We don't have it quite right. We don't know what to do, but we know we want to at least reflect and have the dialogue and conversation. And what they find is that their employees or their communities are super excited about that outcome, because this has, again, been a subject we've never talked about. So one of the reflections is that, have you ever talked about it? I ask leaders all the time, when's the last time you put just like the subject of diversity and inclusion on your agenda as a leader? Never done that. Well, you never done this, never had the conversation, never thought you had to. You're missing all of these opportunities to help your larger team just see the importance and then create the type of environment where these things grow naturally. But doing nothing doesn't mean that it's growing naturally. And that's what people make the false consensus effect that it is.
Another awesome conversation with Dr. Tony Byers. Before I let you go, and
yeah.
I could, again, talk to you for at least another hour.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is great. The multiplier effect of inclusion. I mean, I haven't finished it, but since I just got it a couple days ago, but it's a quick read and really covers a lot of the topics that we talked about today. So for the rapid fire question, it's just to get to know you a little bit more.
All right. I love rapid fire. That's great stuff.
And you talked about this earlier, mentors and heroes. Who's your mentor?
Well, I have a couple of them, but one of them is a retired professor. And now he sits on the economics professor, lawyer, sits on a number of boards for organizations. His name is Joe Knight. And he's just a fabulous person to be able to say, hey, am I thinking about this the right way? Lots of wealth and financial stuff where I can sometimes get lost. So he's one of them.
A lot of folks talk about, always searching for that next big idea or that next big project. What's your next big idea?
My next big idea is this notion, and I mentioned it like one page or one section or chapter in the book, about the habits of inclusion. Like, people think practicing inclusive behaviors are hard, but my perspective is because they're not habits for us, they feel or seem hard. So how do I help individuals or leaders make inclusive behaviors habits? And I want to bring the two together so that you do it naturally without having to think about it.
If you had to bring one book with you on a trip that you're going to be somewhere for a year and you can't read or watch any television, what would that book be?
Okay, that's challenging. I want it to be a big book since it's a whole year where I can't, read anything. Here, you know what? This is going to get you. The dictionary.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You haven't read that already?
No. I can Google a definition now, right? How's that, right?
I like that. That's actually a really good answer. That's a great answer. And then final question, because I know you're from Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Where's your sports allegiance?
Oh, this is recorded session, so.
You don't have to answer. I don't want to.
Yeah, no, it's this funny little thing, in Minnesota for football, we like the Vikings. And now that I've been out of Minnesota for 12, 15 years, I've just adopted other teams, but I still have an affinity for the Vikings. So my favorite, if I'm doing football, my favorite football team is the city I live in plus the Vikings.
Perfect.
Why not?
That counts, yeah.
We haven't had a lot of success in a number of years. We get right to the dance, and so I think it's kind of unofficially allowed for you to have the Vikings and one other team to root for.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but just don't tell my friends in Minnesota I said.
Dr. Tony Byers, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
David, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you. Have a great